The key was still warm in my palm when I heard Ethan's footsteps hit the stairs behind me, fast and hard, like he'd finally remembered how to run, but I didn't turn around. I kept walking toward Liam's door, my fingers already curling around the handle, because I knew that if I looked back at him now, I'd see the mask snap back into place. The charming architect, the contrite husband, the man who had spent 3 years pretending his first wife died in a car accident instead of at the bottom of a staircase with her skull cracked open. "Jenna, stop." His voice was ragged, still wet from the crying, but there was something else underneath it now. Something harder. Something that sounded a lot like the man who'd convinced an entire city that he was a grieving widower while he was busy building a new life on top of a grave. "That key isn't what you think it is. It's not. It's not real. It's a prop. An old project piece. I swear to God, I don't know what just happened to me. I don't know what I said." I was confused. "You were confessing," I said, and I finally turned. He was 3 steps away from me, his face a mess of tears and panic, and that special brand of desperation that only came from a man who'd been caught red-handed in a lie he'd buried so deep he'd almost forgotten it was there. "You told me you killed your first wife. You told me Melanie helped you cover it up. You told me everything, Ethan. And you didn't tell me because you wanted to. You told me because she made you." His eyes darted to my pocket, to the faint golden glow that was still bleeding through the fabric. Please give it back to me. It doesn't belong to you." "Whose is it then?" I asked. "Because it doesn't feel like yours. It feels like hers." I didn't even know why I said it. The words just came out, like they'd been waiting in my throat for years, and the second they hit the air, Ethan's whole body went rigid. His face drained of every last drop of color, and for a second, I actually thought he might pass out. "You don't know what you're talking about," he whispered. "You don't know anything." "I know her name was Rebecca," I said. "I know she had dark hair and dark eyes, and she liked to wear red lipstick. I know she was pregnant when she died. I know she was 7 weeks along, and I know that you pushed her down those stairs because she threatened to leave you and take the baby with her." I was pulling the details from somewhere I didn't recognize. Somewhere that wasn't my memory. Somewhere that felt cold and dark and wet, like the bottom of a well. The key was burning in my pocket now, hot against my hip, and I could feel her, Rebecca, like she was standing right behind me. Not angry. Not vengeful. Just tired. So tired of waiting for someone to listen. Ethan opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. "You don't have any proof of that. You can't prove any of that. The coroner ruled it an accident. The police closed the case. There's nothing you can do." "I don't need to do anything," I said. "I just need to know. I need to know who I married. I need to know what kind of man I let into my bed, into my son's life, into my heart. And now I know." I stepped closer to him, close enough to see the fear flickering behind his eyes. "You're not just a cheater, Ethan. You're not just a liar. You're a killer. And I'm not going to let you raise my son." His hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. I'd never seen him move that fast. In 8 years of marriage, I'd never seen him do anything with that kind of urgency, that kind of raw, animal instinct. His fingers dug into my skin hard enough to leave bruises, and his face was no longer the face of the man I'd loved. It was the face of someone who had already crossed the line once and had no problem crossing it again. "You're not taking him anywhere," he said, and his voice was low now. Flat. Controlled in a way that terrified me more than his shouting ever could. "You're not leaving this house, Jenna. You're not taking my son, and you're not taking that key, and you're not going to say a single word to anyone about what you think you heard tonight. Do you understand me?" I looked down at his hand on my wrist. Then I looked up at his face. Then I did the only thing I could think of. I touched the key the second my fingers brushed the brass surface. I felt it, a surge of something that wasn't mine, something that was older and angrier and more desperate than anything I'd ever experienced. It flooded through me like ice water, like electricity, like a scream that had been trapped inside a locked room for 3 years and was finally breaking free. And then I saw her. She was standing right behind Ethan, just like I'd imagined, except she wasn't a shadow or a feeling or a figment of my guilty conscience. She was real. She was solid. She was wearing a red dress that matched the lipstick I'd seen in the vision, and her dark hair was falling loose around her shoulders, and her eyes were fixed on my husband with an intensity that made my blood run cold. She didn't look tired anymore. She looked readied. Ethan must have seen something in my expression, because he let go of my wrist and stumbled backward, his hands coming up like he was warding off a blow. "What are you looking at? What's behind me?" "She's here," I said. "Rebecca." "She's right behind you." He spun around. He saw nothing. I could tell from the way his shoulders relaxed for just a second, the way his breath caught and then released. But then Rebecca reached out and touched his shoulder, and he went down like a puppet with its strings cut. He crumpled to the floor, his body curling in on itself, his hands clamped over his ears. He was screaming, but it wasn't the kind of scream that came from physical pain. It was the kind of scream that came from a man who was being force-fed the truth he'd spent 3 years trying to forget. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to push you. I didn't know you were pregnant. I swear to God, I didn't know. If I'd known, you would have done it anyway," I said. Or maybe it wasn't me. Maybe it was her, using my voice, using my mouth, because the words didn't feel like mine. They felt like a verdict. "You would have done it anyway because you didn't want to be a father. You didn't want to be tied down. You wanted to be free, and she was the only thing standing in your way." Ethan was crying again. Big, ugly, heaving sobs that shook his entire body. He looked pathetic. He looked broken. He looked exactly the way he'd looked on our wedding day, when he'd promised to love and honor me until death did us part, and I believed him because I was young and stupid and desperate to be loved by someone who seemed so good. But he wasn't good. He was never good. And now I had proof. Rebecca turned to look at me. Her face was soft now, almost peaceful, like she'd finally gotten what she needed. "Thank you," she said, and her voice was the same one I'd heard in the vision, sad and soft and absolutely unafraid. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing." "What do I do now?" I asked her. She smiled. It was a sad smile, the kind of smile that said she'd been waiting for this moment for a very long time. "You already know what to do. You've always known. You just needed permission to do it." And then she was gone, just like that. 1 second she was there, solid and real, and so beautiful it hurt to look at her. The next second she was nothing but a fading warmth in the air, a lingering scent of gardenias that didn't belong in this house, a whisper of a voice that said, "Thank you," one more time before it disappeared entirely. I stood there for a long moment, my heart pounding, my hands shaking, my brain trying to process everything that had just happened. Ethan was still on the floor, still crying, still apologizing to the empty air. He hadn't moved. He hadn't even looked up at me. He didn't know she was gone. He didn't know that the ghost he'd been running from had finally made her peace and moved on. He was still trapped in his own guilt, his own fear, his own pathetic little bubble of self-loathing, and I was done with him. I walked over to Liam's door. I pushed it open slowly, quietly, and I looked at my son. He was curled up in his little race car bed, clutching the stuffed dinosaur he'd had since he was a baby, his thumb in his mouth, his face slack with sleep. He looked so small, so innocent, so completely unaware that the world he'd woken up in that morning was about to change forever. I knelt down beside his bed. I brushed the hair off his forehead, and he stirred but didn't wake. "I'm going to take care of you," I whispered. "I'm going to take care of us. And I'm never going to let anyone hurt you again. Not him. Not her. No one." I stood up, and I walked back out into the hallway. Ethan was still on the floor, but he was starting to come out of it now. His sobs had faded to hiccups, and his hands had dropped from his ears. He was staring at me with red-rimmed eyes, and there was something in his gaze that I hadn't seen in years. Feared, real, genuine, bone-deep fear. "Jenna," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Broken. Please. Please don't do this. Please don't take him. Please don't leave me. I can change. I can be better. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll get help. Just please, please don't go." I looked down at him. This man I'd loved. This man I'd trusted. This man who had built a life on a foundation of lies so deep that even he didn't know where the truth ended and the fiction began. "You should have thought about that before you killed her. I said, and then I walked past him, down the stairs and out the front door. The night air hit me like a wall. It was cold and sharp and clean, and it smelled like rain. I stood on the front porch for a long moment, just breathing, just letting myself feel the weight of everything that had happened. The key was still in my pocket. It was cool now, neutral, like a piece of metal that had done its job and was waiting for me to figure out what came next. I pulled it out, looked at it, held it up to the moonlight. It was just a key. Brass. Heavy. Old-fashioned. The kind you'd use to open a door in a house that didn't exist anymore. But I knew it wasn't just a key. I knew it was a beginning. A door to a truth I hadn't even begun to uncover. A truth that would take me places I couldn't imagine, to people I'd never met, to a past that was about to become my future. And I knew, with a certainty that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with instinct, that this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. That Ethan was still in the house. Still broken. Still crying. Still trapped in a prison of his own making. But I was freed. I walked down the driveway, toward my car, toward my son's future, toward whatever was waiting for me on the other side of this night. I didn't look back. I didn't need to because I had the key and I had a story to write and it was going to be beautiful. Or it was going to destroy everything I'd ever known. Either way, I was ready. The key pulsed one more time, warm and alive in my palm, and I felt it, a pull, a direction, a whisper that said, keep going, keep digging, keep finding out the truth about the man you married. And I did. I got in the car. I started the engine. I drove away from the house that had never really been a home, and I didn't stop. Not for Ethan's screams. Not for his calls. Not for anything. Because I was done being his wife. And I was ready to become something else. Something he never saw coming, something that was going to change everything. The key glowed once more, and then it went dark, and I just knew, that this was the moment, the beginning of the end, and I couldn't wait to see what came next. The key was still warm in my palm when Ethan's footsteps hit the stairs behind me, fast and hard, like he'd finally remembered how to run. I didn't turn around. I kept walking toward Liam's door, my fingers already curling around the handle, because I knew that if I looked back at him now, I'd see the mask snap back into place. The charming architect, the contrite husband, the man who had spent 3 years pretending his first wife died in a car accident instead of at the bottom of a staircase with her skull cracked open. Jenna, stop. His voice was ragged, still wet from crying, but there was something else underneath it now. Something harder. Something that sounded a lot like the man who'd convinced an entire city he was a grieving widower while he built a new life on top of a grave. That key isn't what you think it is. It's not real. It's a prop. An old project piece. I swear to God, I don't know what just happened to me. I don't know what I said. I was confused. You were confessing, I said, and I finally turned. He was 3 steps away, his face a mess of tears and panic, and that special brand of desperation that only came from a man who'd been caught in a lie he'd buried so deep he'd almost forgotten it was there. You told me you killed your first wife. You told me Melanie helped you cover it up. You told me everything, Ethan. And you didn't tell me because you wanted to. You told me because she made you. His eyes darted to my pocket, to the faint golden glow still bleeding through the fabric. Please. Please give it back to me. It doesn't belong to you. Whose is it then? I asked. Because it doesn't feel like yours. It feels like hers. I didn't even know why I said it. The words just came out, like they'd been waiting in my throat for years, and the second they hit the air, Ethan's whole body went rigid. His face drained of every last drop of color, and for a second, I actually thought he might pass out. You don't know what you're talking about, he whispered. You don't know anything. I know her name was Rebecca. I know she had dark hair and dark eyes, and she liked to wear red lipstick. I know she was pregnant when she died. I know she was 7 weeks along, and I know that you pushed her down those stairs because she threatened to leave you and take the baby with her. I was pulling the details from somewhere I didn't recognize. Somewhere that wasn't my memory. Somewhere that felt cold and dark and wet, like the bottom of a well. The key was burning in my pocket now, hot against my hip, and I could feel her, Rebecca, like she was standing right behind me. Not angry. Not vengeful. Just tired. So tired of waiting for someone to listen. Ethan opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. You don't have any proof of that. You can't prove any of that. The coroner ruled it an accident. The police closed the case. There's nothing you can do. I don't need to do anything, I said. I just need to know. I need to know who I married. I need to know what kind of man I let into my bed, into my son's life, into my heart. And now I know. I stepped closer, close enough to see the fear flickering behind his eyes. You're not just a cheater, Ethan. You're not just a liar. You're a killer. And I'm not going to let you raise my son. His hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. I'd never seen him move that fast. In 8 years of marriage, I'd never seen him do anything with that kind of urgency, that kind of raw, animal instinct. His fingers dug into my skin hard enough to leave bruises, and his face was no longer the face of the man I'd loved. It was the face of someone who had already crossed the line once and had no problem crossing it again. You're not taking him anywhere, he said, and his voice was low now. Flat. Controlled in a way that terrified me more than his shouting ever could. You're not leaving this house, Jenna. You're not taking my son, and you're not taking that key, and you're not going to say a single word to anyone about what you think you heard tonight. Do you understand me? I looked down at his hand on my wrist. Then I looked up at his face. Then I did the only thing I could think of. I touched the key the second my fingers brushed the brass surface. I felt it, a surge of something that wasn't mine, something that was older and angrier and more desperate than anything I'd ever experienced. It flooded through me like ice water, like electricity, like a scream that had been trapped inside a locked room for 3 years and was finally breaking free. And then I saw her. She was standing right behind Ethan, just like I'd imagined, except she wasn't a shadow or a feeling or a figment of my guilty conscience. She was real. She was solid. She was wearing a red dress that matched the lipstick I'd seen in the vision, and her dark hair was falling loose around her shoulders, and her eyes were fixed on my husband with an intensity that made my blood run cold. She didn't look tired anymore. She looked readied. Ethan must have seen something in my expression, because he let go of my wrist and stumbled backward, his hands coming up like he was warding off a blow. Why are you looking at what's behind me? She's here, I said. Rebecca. She's right behind you. He spun around. He saw nothing. I could tell from the way his shoulders relaxed for just a second, the way his breath caught and then released. But then Rebecca reached out and touched his shoulder, and he went down like a puppet with its strings cut. He crumpled to the floor, his body curling in on itself, his hands clamped over his ears. He was screaming, but it wasn't the kind of scream that came from physical pain. It was the kind of scream that came from a man who was being force-fed the truth he'd spent 3 years trying to forget. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to push you. I didn't know you were pregnant. I swear to God, I didn't know. If I'd known, you would have done it anyway, I said. Or maybe it wasn't me. Maybe it was her, using my voice, using my mouth, because the words didn't feel like mine. They felt like a verdict. You would have done it anyway because you didn't want to be a father. You didn't want to be tied down. You wanted to be free, and she was the only thing standing in your way. Ethan was crying again. Big, ugly, heaving sobs that shook his entire body. He looked pathetic. He looked broken. He looked exactly the way he'd looked on our wedding day, when he'd promised to love and honor me until death did us part, and I believed him because I was young and stupid and desperate to be loved by someone who seemed so good. But he wasn't good. He was never good. And now I had proof. Rebecca turned to look at me. Her face was soft now, almost peaceful, like she'd finally gotten what she needed. Thank you, she said, and her voice was the same one I'd heard in the vision, sad and soft and absolutely unafraid. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. What do I do now? I asked her. She smiled. It was a sad smile, the kind of smile that said she'd been waiting for this moment for a very long time. You already know what to do. You've always known. You just needed permission to do it. And then she was gone, just like that. 1 second she was there, solid and real, and so beautiful it hurt to look at her. The next second she was nothing but a fading warmth in the air, a lingering scent of gardenias that didn't belong in this house, a whisper of a voice that said, "Thank you," one more time before it disappeared entirely. I stood there for a long moment, my heart pounding, my hands shaking, my brain trying to process everything that had just happened. Ethan was still on the floor, still crying, still apologizing to the empty air. He hadn't moved. He hadn't even looked up at me. He didn't know she was gone. He didn't know that the ghost he'd been running from had finally made her peace and moved on. He was still trapped in his own guilt, his own fear, his own pathetic little bubble of self-loathing, and I was done with him. I walked over to Liam's door. I pushed it open slowly, quietly, and I looked at my son. He was curled up in his little race car bed, clutching the stuffed dinosaur he'd had since he was a baby, his thumb in his mouth, his face slack with sleep. He looked so small, so innocent, so completely unaware that the world he'd woken up in that morning was about to change forever. I knelt down beside his bed. I brushed the hair off his forehead, and he stirred but didn't wake. "I'm going to take care of you," I whispered. "I'm going to take care of us. And I'm never going to let anyone hurt you again. Not him. Not her. No one." I stood up, and I walked back out into the hallway. Ethan was still on the floor, but he was starting to come out of it now. His sobs had faded to hiccups, and his hands had dropped from his ears. He was staring at me with red-rimmed eyes, and there was something in his gaze that I hadn't seen in years. Feared, real, genuine, bone-deep fear. "Jenna," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Broken. Please. Please don't do this. Please don't take him. Please don't leave me. I can change. I can be better. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll get help. Just please, please don't go." I looked down at him. This man I'd loved. This man I'd trusted. This man who had built a life on a foundation of lies so deep that even he didn't know where the truth ended and the fiction began. "You should have thought about that before you killed her," I said, and then I walked past him, down the stairs, and out the front door. The night air hit me like a wall. It was cold and sharp and clean, and it smelled like rain. I stood on the front porch for a long moment, just breathing, just letting myself feel the weight of everything that had happened. The key was still in my pocket. It was cool now, neutral, like a piece of metal that had done its job and was waiting for me to figure out what came next. And I pulled it out, looked at it, held it up to the moonlight. It was just a key. Brass. Heavy. Old-fashioned. The kind you'd use to open a door in a house that didn't exist anymore. But I knew it wasn't just a key. I knew it was a beginning. A door to a truth I hadn't even begun to uncover. A truth that would take me places I couldn't imagine, to people I'd never met, to a past that was about to become my future. And I knew, with a certainty that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with instinct, that this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. That Ethan was still in the house. Still broken. Still crying. Still trapped in a prison of his own making. But I was freed. I walked down the driveway, toward my car, toward my son's future, toward whatever was waiting for me on the other side of this night. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because I had the key, and I had a story to write, and it was going to be beautiful. Or it was going to destroy everything I'd ever known. Either way, I was ready. I opened the car door, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the street I'd driven down 1,000 times before. But tonight, it looked different. Tonight, it looked like an escape route. That I pulled out of the driveway, and I didn't stop. Not for Ethan's screams. Not for his calls. Not for anything, because I was done being his wife, and I was ready to become something else. Something he never saw coming, something that was going to change everything. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. I ignored it. It buzzed again, and then a text popped up, just a few words that made my blood run cold. "You don't know what you've just done. Melanie is coming, and she's not going to let you walk away." I read it once, twice, 3 times, and then I smiled, because Melanie wasn't the one who should be scared. That I had the key. That I had Rebecca's truth. And I was just getting started. The road stretched out in front of me, dark and endless, and I drove straight into it. The key pulsed in my pocket one last time, warm and alive, like it was guiding me somewhere, and I let it, because this was the moment, the beginning of the end, and I couldn't wait to see what came next. I drove for 47 minutes before I pulled over. I know the exact number because I counted every one of them, my fingers white-knuckled on the steering wheel, my eyes darting to the rear-view mirror every 3 seconds. No headlights followed me. No black sedans with tinted windows. No Melanie emerging from the shadows like the villain in a bad thriller. But Ethan's text was still burned into my brain. Asterisk Melanie is coming. And she's not going to let you walk away. Asterisk I parked outside a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. The kind with flickering neon and cracked vinyl booths and the smell of stale coffee that clung to your clothes for hours. It was the kind of place no one would look twice at a woman sitting alone at 3 a.m. with a brass key clutched in her palm. The waitress brought me coffee I didn't ask for. I didn't drink it. I just sat there, staring at the key, waiting for it to do something. Waiting for Rebecca to appear again. Waiting for some sign that I wasn't completely losing my mind. Nothing happened. The key sat there, cold and inert, like a piece of junk I'd found at a flea market. No golden glow.
No ghostly whispers.
No visions of dead wives or falling down staircases that I almost laughed. Maybe I did laugh. The waitress gave me a weird look and walked away. I'd just spent the worst night of my life watching my husband confess to murder, and now I was sitting in a diner with a key that had apparently decided to go silent. What was I supposed to do next? Go to the police, tell them my husband's dead wife's ghost made him confess to pushing her down the stairs, and by the way, here's the key that unlocked her secrets. They'd have me committed that I needed a plan. A real plan. Something that didn't rely on supernatural intervention. My phone buzzed again. Not Ethan this time. A number I didn't recognize to asterisk. You have something that doesn't belong to you. Return it, and we can pretend this never happened. Asterisk, I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I didn't type anything. Whoever this was, Melanie, probably, or someone she'd sent, they didn't get to threaten me. Not tonight. Not ever. I typed back 3 words. Asterisk, come and get it. Asterisk. Then I turned my phone off and shoved it into my bag. The key was still cold. Still silent. But I knew it wasn't dead. I could feel it. Somewhere deep in my chest. A faint pulse like a second heartbeat. It was waiting. Biding its time. Just like Rebecca had been waiting for 3 years, and just like her, I wasn't going to let anyone shut me up. I finished my coffee. I don't know why, but it felt like the right thing to do. And then I drove to the only place I could think of, my sister's house. Claire lived on the other side of town, in a little bungalow with a wraparound porch and a garden full of overgrown roses that she never had time to prune. She was a divorce attorney, which meant she'd seen every shade of marital disaster, and she was the only person in the world I trusted with the truth. It was 4 a.m. when I knocked on her door. She opened it in her ratty bathrobe, her hair a mess, her eyes bleary with sleep. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside without a single question. Start talking, she said, shoving a mug of tea into my hands, and I told her everything.
The key.
The ghost. The confession. The affair. The text. All of it. I didn't leave anything out, because Claire had a sixth sense for lies, and I was too tired to try it. By the time I finished, the sun was starting to rise, painting her kitchen in shades of pink and gold. Claire hadn't interrupted once. She just sat there, nursing her own mug of tea, her face unreadable. Okay, she said finally. Let me get this straight. Your husband had an affair. His mistress pushed your kid off a slide. His dead wife's ghost used a magic key to make him confess to murder. And now the mistress is threatening you. When she put it like that, it sounded insane. Yes, I said. Claire set down her mug and leaned forward. Jenna, I've handled a lot of crazy cases. I've seen spouses fake their own deaths, hide offshore accounts, even try to sell their kids on the black market.
But this...
She shook her head. This is a whole new level. I know how it sounds. I don't think you do. She reached across the table and took my hand. But I believe you. I don't know how or why, but I believe you. And I'm going to help you. I felt something unclench in my chest. For the first time since I'd touched that key, I wasn't alone. First things first, Claire said. You need a lawyer. Not me, I'm too close to this. But someone who specializes in criminal defense and custody battles. Someone who won't blink when you tell them your husband is a murderer. I don't have proof, I said. The ghost isn't exactly admissible in court. Claire smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who had spent 15 years tearing apart liars in the courtroom. You don't need proof of the murder.
Not yet.
You just need enough doubt to keep Liam away from him. And with the text messages, the affair, the assault on your son, we can work with that. But what about Melanie? She knows about the key. She knows what it can do. Then we deal with her, too. Claire stood up and started pacing. She's the weak link. She helped cover up Rebecca's death. That makes her an accessory. If we can get her to turn on Ethan, we've got everything we need. How do we do that? Claire stopped pacing. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It was part calculation, part pity, part something that looked a lot like fear. The key, she said. You said it makes people confess. It forced Ethan to tell the truth. What if it does the same thing to Melanie? I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, my phone buzzed from inside my bag. I'd turned it off. I was sure I'd turned it off, but there it was, buzzing against the fabric, insistent and urgent. I pulled it out. The screen was lit up with a message from an unknown number. The same unknown number that had threatened me before. Asterisk, you think you're safe with your sister, think again. Asterisk, my blood went cold. Claire saw my face and snatched the phone out of my hand. Her eyes scanned the message, and I watched the color drain from her cheeks. How did they know I was here? I whispered. Claire didn't answer. She was already dialing, her fingers flying across the keypad. I'm calling the police. We're getting a protection order. You're not going back to that house, and you're not going anywhere alone. The key in my pocket was warm again. Not hot, not burning, but warm, like it was waking up. I pulled it out and held it in my palm. It pulsed once, twice, and then I felt it. A pull, a direction, a whisper that said go. What is it? Claire asked, her phone still pressed to her ear. I don't know, I said. But it wants me to go somewhere. Don't be ridiculous. You're not going anywhere. Not until the police get here. But I was already standing, already moving toward the door. The key was tugging at me, pulling me forward, and I couldn't fight it. It was like a magnetic force, like something inside me had locked onto its signal and wasn't letting go. Jenna, stop. Claire grabbed my arm. What are you doing? I have to follow it, I said. I have to see where it leads. Jenna, you're not making any sense. This could be a trap. This could be Melanie. It could be Rebecca, I said. She's trying to show me something. I can feel it. Claire stared at me for a long moment. Then she let go of my arm and grabbed her keys.
Fine.
But I'm coming with you. The key led us to a house I'd never seen before. It was a Victorian, old and crumbling, with peeling paint and a porch that sagged in the middle. It sat at the end of a dead-end street, surrounded by overgrown weeds and the skeletons of dead trees. The windows were dark, but the key in my hand was glowing now, casting a faint golden light across the front steps. What is this place? Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, I said. But I think this is where she died. I walked up the steps, the key guiding me like a compass. The front door was locked, but when I reached out with the key, it slid into the lock like it had been waiting for me. The door swung open. The house smelled like dust and decay and something else. Something that made my stomach turn. And inside, in the darkness, I saw her, not Rebecca. Someone else, Melanie. She was standing in the middle of the foyer, her hands clasped in front of her, her blonde hair shining in the dim light. She was wearing a red dress, the same red dress Rebecca had been wearing in my vision. She smiled at me, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. Took you long enough, she said. I've been waiting. The key in my hand pulsed again, stronger now, and I heard Rebecca's voice in my head, soft and urgent. Asterisk, she's the one. She's the one who sealed the door. Don't let her close it again. Asterisk. I looked at Melanie, at the woman who had pushed my son, at the woman who had helped my husband cover up a murder, at the woman who was standing in the house where Rebecca had died, wearing her dress, like she was mocking her memory, and I smiled back. Here I am, I said. What do you want? Melanie's smile faltered. Just for a second. But I saw she was afraid, and that was all I needed to know. Melanie took a step toward me, her heels clicking against the cracked marble floor like a countdown. The red dress swished around her knees, and up close, I could see it wasn't Rebecca's dress at all. It was close, the same shade, the same cut, but the fabric was newer, shinier, the kind of thing you bought at a department store, not the kind of thing a dead woman had been buried in. "You don't know what you've walked into," she said. Her voice was calm, controlled, the voice of a woman who'd practiced this speech in front of a mirror. "This house doesn't belong to you. That key doesn't belong to you. And neither does the man you think you're protecting." "I'm not protecting anyone," I said. "I'm finding the truth. You're the one who's been hiding it." Melanie laughed. It was a bright, brittle sound, like glass shattering. "The truth, you want the truth, fine. Here it is. Rebecca was a mess. A drunk. A liar. She cheated on Ethan 6 times before they even got married. She was pregnant with someone else's baby when she fell down those stairs. She was so wasted that night she could barely stand. Ethan didn't push her. He tried to catch her, but she was already gone before he could reach her." I felt the key pulse in my hand, hot and sharp, like it was responding to her words. Rebecca's voice whispered in my ear, barely audible. Asterisk, she's lying. She always lies. Asterisk, you're lying, I said. Melanie's smile didn't waver. Then why did the police close the case? Why did the coroner rule it an accident? Why did Ethan walk away without a single charge? Because you helped him cover it up, I said. Because you were there. You saw what happened, and instead of calling the police, you called him. You told him you'd make it go away. And you did. Something flickered in Melanie's eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition. She hadn't expected me to know that part. You don't know anything, she said, but her voice was less steady now. You're just a housewife with a magic trinket and a chip on her shoulder. You think you can take on me, take on Ethan. You don't even have a job. You don't have a dime to your name. You have nothing. I have Liam, I said. And that's more than you'll ever have. The words hit her like a slap. Her composure cracked, just for a second, and I saw it. The raw, ugly jealousy underneath. She wanted what I had. The husband, the house, the child. And she'd do anything to take it. You think you're so special, she spat. You think he loves you, he married you, because I told him to. I picked you out. You were convenient. You were easy. You had no family, no money, no options. You were perfect. Claire stepped forward, her phone still in her hand. I've got all of this recorded, she said. Every word. You just admitted to being an accessory to murder. You just admitted to conspiracy. You're done, Melanie. Melanie's eyes darted to Claire's phone. For the first time, she looked nervous. That's not admissible. You didn't have my consent. Doesn't matter, Claire said. I'm a lawyer. I know exactly what's admissible and what isn't. And right now, I've got enough to bring you down. Both of you. Melanie's hands clenched at her sides. I could see her calculating, weighing her options, trying to find a way out. But there wasn't one. Not anymore. I'd backed her into a corner and she knew it. You think you've won, she said slowly. But you haven't. You don't understand what you're dealing with. That key, it's not just a ghost. It's a door. A door that's been locked for 3 years. And if you open it, you're going to let in things you can't control. Like what? I asked. Melanie smiled again, but this time there was something else in her expression. Something that looked almost like pity. Like her, she said, and she pointed behind me. I turned. Rebecca was standing in the doorway of the foyer, but she didn't look like she had before. She looked different, darker. Her red dress was torn and stained, and there was a gash on her forehead that was still bleeding. Her eyes were no longer soft and sad. They were hard, angry. Asterisk, you let her in. Asterisk, she said, and her voice was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. Asterisk, you let her into my house. You let her wear my clothes. You let her take everything that was mine. Asterisk. Rebecca, I said. I didn't. Asterisk, you brought her here. Asterisk, she screamed, and the windows rattled. The lights flickered. A painting fell off the wall and shattered on the floor. Asterisk, you brought her to my house, and now she's going to seal the door again. She's going to lock me out. She's going to bury me forever. Asterisk, Melanie laughed again, louder this time. She's losing it. The key is making her lose it. That's what happens when you don't know how to use it. You think you're in control, but you're not. You're just a passenger. I looked down at the key in my hand. It was glowing brighter than ever, almost blinding, and I could feel it pulling me in two directions at once. Rebecca wanted me to follow her. Melanie wanted me to stop. And I was stuck in the middle, trying to figure out which one was telling the truth. Jenna, Claire said, her voice sharp. We need to go.
Now.
But I couldn't move. The key was holding me in place, anchoring me to the floor, and I could feel something else, something that wasn't Rebecca or Melanie. Something older. Something that had been in this house long before any of them. The key was trying to show me something. Something I'd missed, and I closed my eyes and let it pull me till the vision hit me like a wave. I was in the house, but it was different, cleaner, brighter, full of furniture and family photos and the smell of fresh-baked bread. Rebecca was there, and she was happy, laughing at something a younger, kinder-looking Ethan had said. They were in love. They were building a life, and then the door opened, and Melanie walked in. She was younger, too, her hair shorter, her smile wider. She was carrying a bottle of wine and a folder of papers. I brought the documents, she said. The ones you asked for. Rebecca's face went pale. You told me you'd destroy them. I lied, Melanie said. I always lie. You know that about me. Ethan looked confused. Rebecca, what's going on? Nothing, Rebecca said quickly. It's nothing. Melanie, let's talk outside. But Melanie didn't move. She handed the folder to Ethan instead. Read it, she said. Read what your wife has been hiding from you. Ethan opened the folder. I couldn't see what was inside, but I watched his face change, from confusion to shock to rage. You were going to leave me, he said. You were going to take everything. The house. The money. The baby. It's not what you think, Rebecca said. It's not. Don't lie to me. Ethan threw the folder across the room. You've been planning this for months. You've been sleeping with someone else. You've been stealing from our accounts. You're not even sure the baby is mine. That's not true, Rebecca sobbed. That's not true. Melanie is lying. She's always lying. She wants to destroy us. Melanie smiled. I'm not the one who's been cheating, Rebecca. I'm not the one who's been hiding bank accounts. I'm just the one who found out the truth. Ethan was shaking. I could see it in his hands, in his jaw, in the way he was barely holding himself together. Get out, he said. Get out of this house. You're not coming back. Ethan, please, get out. Rebecca grabbed his arm, and he pushed her away. Not hard. Not like he meant to hurt her. But she stumbled, her heel catching on the edge of the rug, and then she was falling down the stairs, hitting the bottom with a sound that made my stomach turn. And Melanie was there, standing at the top, watching it happen. Watching Rebecca's body crumple. Watching the blood pool around her head. And she didn't call an ambulance. She didn't call the police. She just stood there, her smile still in place, and said, See. I told you. She was always going to leave you. The vision faded. I was back in the foyer, my knees weak, my hands shaking. Rebecca was still there, but she was fading, her form growing translucent. The gash on her forehead was gone. The anger was gone. She just looked tired. Asterisk, you saw. Asterisk, she said. Asterisk, you saw what she did. She didn't push me. She didn't have to. She just let me fall. And then she made sure everyone believed it was Ethan's fault. Asterisk, why? I asked. Why would she do that? Asterisk, because she wanted him. She's always wanted him. And I was in the way. Asterisk. I turned to Melanie. She was still standing there, still smiling, but there was something different in her eyes now. Something that looked a lot like fear. You're a monster. I said. No, she said. I'm a survivor. There's a difference. You let her die. You let Ethan take the blame. You built your whole life on a lie. And what are you going to do about it? Melanie asked. You have no proof. You have nothing. Just a key and a ghost that no one else can see. I looked down at the key. It was still glowing, still warm, but it felt different now. Less urgent. Less demanding. Like it had shown me what I needed to see and was waiting for me to make a choice. I looked at Claire. She was still holding her phone, still recording, still watching me with that expression that said she was ready to do whatever I asked. And I looked at Rebecca. She was almost gone now, Just a faint shimmer in the air, but she was smiling. The same sad smile she'd given me in my living room. Asterisk, you know what to do. Asterisk, she said. Asterisk, you've always known. Asterisk, I nodded. And then I walked up to Melanie, held the key out in front of me, and pressed it against her chest. The reaction was immediate. She screamed, a raw, animal sound that echoed off the walls, and then she went limp, crumpling to the floor just like Ethan had. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't seeing me. She was seeing something else. Something that was making her relive every terrible thing she'd ever done. The truth, I said. You're going to tell me the truth. All of it. Or I'm going to leave you here, in this house with her. Melanie sobbed.
Please.
Please don't. I'll tell you anything. Just make it stop. Tell me, I said. Tell me everything. Melanie's confession spilled out of her like water from a cracked dam. The key pressed against her chest seemed to have dissolved every wall she'd ever built, and what came out wasn't a polished story or a calculated lie. It was ugly.
Raw.
The kind of truth you couldn't take back even if you wanted to. I found her at the bottom of the stairs, she gasped, her fingers clawing at the floor like she was trying to hold onto something solid. She was already dead. I checked her pulse. There was nothing. And I stood there and I thought, this is my chance. I waited until Ethan came running down, and then I told him it was his fault. I told him he pushed her. I told him I'd help him cover it up if he gave me what I wanted. What did you want? I asked. Everything. Melanie's laugh was broken, hysterical. I wanted the house. The money. Him. I wanted to be her. I'd spent years watching her have everything I deserved, and finally, she was out of the way. Ethan was so guilty, so desperate. He would have done anything. He signed over half his assets to me. He let me control the narrative. He let me become the only person who knew the truth. But you weren't the only person, I said. Rebecca knew. She was still here, in this house, watching you. Watching everything. Melanie's eyes went wide. She never left. I felt her. Every time I came back to this place, I felt her breathing down my neck. That's why I had to lock the door. That's why I had to seal the key. I couldn't let anyone else find it. I couldn't let anyone else know what really happened. Claire stepped closer, her phone still recording. So you planted the key in Ethan's office. You made sure he thought it was just a prop. You manipulated him into keeping it hidden. I had to, Melanie sobbed. If anyone touched it, if anyone unlocked the door, she would come back. She would tell everyone what I did. And then everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed, would be gone. I looked down at the key in my hand. It was still warm, still pulsing, but the glow had faded to a soft, steady light. Rebecca was standing behind Melanie now, her form barely visible, but I could see her face clearly. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't sad. She was just waiting. Rebecca, I said. What do you want me to do? She smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen on her face. I want you to let me go, she said. Asterisk, I've been trapped here for 3 years. Trapped in this house. Trapped in the memory of what she did to me.
I'm tired, Zene.
I'm so tired. Asterisk, but if I let you go, she gets away with it. She gets away with everything. Asterisk, she'll get what she deserves. Asterisk, Rebecca said. Asterisk, she already is. Look at her. Asterisk, I looked at Melanie. She was still on the floor, still crying, but there was something different about her. Something that looked like the beginning of a breakdown. Her hands were shaking. Her breath was coming in short, ragged gasps. She wasn't the cold, calculating woman I'd faced in the foyer. She was broken. The truth is out now, I said. You can't hide it anymore. You can't pretend you're innocent. Everyone's going to know what you did. Melanie looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Please, she whispered. Please don't tell anyone. I'll do anything. I'll leave. I'll disappear. I'll never come back. I don't care what you do, I said. I only care about one thing. The truth about Liam. Why did you push him? Melanie's face crumpled. He reminded me of her. He had her eyes. Her smile. He looked at me like he knew what I'd done. Like he was judging me. I couldn't take it. I just wanted him to stop looking at me. I felt something snap inside me. All the anger, all the fear, all the pain of the last few hours coalesced into a single, burning point of clarity. You pushed a 5-year-old boy because he looked at you the wrong way, I said. You are the most pathetic person I've ever met. Melanie didn't argue. She just curled into a ball on the floor and started crying again. Did I turn to Claire? I'm done here. Let's call the police. Claire nodded. She was already dialing, her face grim but satisfied. I'll make sure they get the full story. All of it. She's not going to walk away from this. As she spoke into the phone, I walked over to Rebecca. She was fading now, her form growing dimmer with each passing second. But she was still smiling. Thank you. Asterisk, she said. Asterisk, for listening. For believing. For giving me peace. Where will you go? I asked. Somewhere warm. Asterisk, she said. Asterisk, somewhere I can rest. Asterisk, and then she was gone. The key in my hand went cold. The glow disappeared entirely. It was just a piece of metal again, heavy and inert, like it had given everything it had to give. I stood in the middle of the foyer, surrounded by the dust and decay of a house that had held too many secrets for too long, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace, not happiness. Not relief. Just peace. Claire finished her call and walked over to me. They're on their way. What do you want to do now? I want to go home, I said. I want to see Liam. I want to hold him and never let go. Claire put her hand on my shoulder. You're not going back to that house, Jenna. You're staying with me. You and Liam. Until we figure this out. I nodded. I was too tired to argue. We walked out of the Victorian house, leaving Melanie on the floor, leaving Rebecca's ghost to rest, leaving the key behind on the mantelpiece where it belonged. I didn't need it anymore. I had everything I needed. The sun was fully up now, bright and warm, and the world felt new.
Clean.
Like I was seeing it for the first time. I can't believe it's over, I said. Claire gave me a look. It's not over. Not really. There's still Ethan. There's still the custody battle. There's still the fallout from all of this. But you're not facing it alone. You have me. You have Liam. And you have the truth. I smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. Let's go home, I said it, and for the first time in 3 years, I meant it. We drove back to Claire's house in silence. I didn't check my phone. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I just watched the houses roll by, the trees, the people starting their days, and I thought about how strange it was that the world kept going even when your entire life had just fallen apart. Claire pulled into her driveway and killed the engine. You ready for this? Ready for what? To be a single mom. To fight for your son. To build a new life from scratch. I thought about Liam, about his sticky fingers and his endless questions and his laugh that sounded like sunshine. I thought about the life I'd built with Ethan, the lies, the betrayals, the years I'd wasted loving a man who never deserved it. And I thought about the future, the unknown, the terrifying, exhilarating, wide-open future that was waiting for me. I'm ready, I said, and I meant it. I walked into Claire's house and went straight to the guest room where Liam was still sleeping. I lay down beside him, my hand on his back, feeling the rise and fall of his breath. He stirred, mumbled something about dinosaurs, and then settled back into sleep. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. But I lay there, watching the light play across his face, and I made a promise to myself I would never let anyone hurt him again. I would never let anyone control me again. I would never be the woman I used to be. And when the sun was fully up and the house started to stir, I sat up, took a deep breath, and walked into the kitchen. Claire was already there, pouring coffee, her phone pressed to her ear. She hung up and looked at me. Ethan's been arrested. They picked him up an hour ago. He's not going to get bail. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vindication. I just felt, calm. What about Melanie? I asked. She's in custody too. They're charging her with accessory to murder, obstruction of justice, and assault on a minor. She's not going anywhere. I sat down at the table and took the coffee Claire offered me. It was black and bitter, and it was the best thing I'd ever tasted. What now? I asked. Claire smiled. Now we fight. We fight for custody. We fight for a fresh start. We fight for Everything you deserve. I looked out the window. The garden was overgrown, the roses wild and untamed, and for some reason, that made me smile. I want to fix this place, I said. I want to make it beautiful. I want to build something new. Claire laughed. You've always been a fixer, Jenna. That's why you stayed with Ethan so long. That's why you tried to make it work. But you can't fix what's broken beyond repair. You can only move on. I know, I said. That's what I'm doing. I'm moving on. And I meant it, because the key was gone. The ghosts were gone. The lies were gone, and all that was left was the truth about who I was. The truth about what I wanted. The truth about the future I was going to build. And it was going to be beautiful. The first week without Ethan felt like learning to breathe underwater. I woke up every morning in Claire's guest room, disoriented, reaching for a side of the bed that was empty, and then remembering.
The key.
The confession. The house. The way Melanie had crumpled on the floor like a doll with her strings cut. It all came back in a rush, and I'd lie there for a minute, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the panic to subside. It always did. Liam was the reason. He'd crawl into bed with me every morning, still half asleep, his small body warm against mine, and he'd ask the same question every time. Is Daddy coming home today? And I'd say the same thing.
No, baby.
Not today. He didn't cry anymore. The first few days, he'd sobbed, asking why, asking if it was his fault, asking if Daddy was mad at him. I'd held him and told him the truth as gently as I could. Daddy had done some bad things. Daddy needed to stay away for a while. But none of it was Liam's fault. None of it. He was 5. He didn't understand the nuances of murder and cover-ups and ghostly vengeance. But he understood that I was there, that I wasn't going anywhere, that he was safe. And somehow, that was enough. Claire had gone back to work, but she checked in constantly, texting me updates, keeping me informed about the legal proceedings. Ethan had been denied bail. His lawyer was pushing for a plea deal, but Claire's contacts in the DA's office said he was holding out, still insisting he hadn't pushed Rebecca, still insisting it was an accident. He's not going to admit to anything, Claire told me over the phone one evening. He's convinced he can talk his way out of this. He's been trying to get you to call him, hasn't he? I looked at my phone. There were 12 missed calls from an unknown number. I hadn't answered a single one. Yeah, I said. He's been calling. Don't pick up. Don't give him anything. He's desperate, Jenna. Desperate people say desperate things. They also do desperate things. I knew she was right. I knew I should block the number, erase him from my life completely. But a part of me, the stupid, stubborn part that had loved him for 8 years, kept waiting, kept hoping for something I knew would never come. An apology, an explanation, some sign that the man I'd married was still in there somewhere, that I never got it. The calls kept coming. The texts kept piling up. And I kept ignoring them, burying myself in the routine of caring for Liam, of rebuilding my life from the ground up. I started with the garden. Claire's roses had gone wild, thorny and overgrown, choking out everything else. I spent hours out there, pruning and weeding, my hands raw and bleeding, but I didn't care. It felt good to do something physical. Something that didn't involve courtrooms or lawyers or the ghost of my husband's first wife. Liam helped. He'd dig in the dirt with a plastic shovel, pretending he was a paleontologist, unearthing the bones of ancient dinosaurs. His imagination was a marvel. He could turn a pile of mud into a castle, a stick into a sword, a ladybug into a dragon. He reminded me of what it was like to see the world as a place of wonder instead of a place of traps. "You're doing good, Mommy," he said one afternoon, looking up at me with dirt smeared across his cheek. "The flowers are going to be so pretty." I smiled. "Thanks, buddy. You're doing good, too." He grinned and went back to his digging. And I felt something shift in my chest. Something that felt a lot like hope, but hope was fragile. And when you've been burned as badly as I had, you learn to guard it carefully. The first time I left the house alone, I almost turned back. Claire had offered to watch Liam for a few hours so I could run errands. Groceries. Bank. The kind of mundane tasks that had once seemed so ordinary and now felt monumental. I stood in the driveway, staring at my car, my hands shaking. "Just go," I told myself. "It's just a grocery store. You've done this 1,000 times. But it wasn't the grocery store I was afraid of. It was the world. The world that had seen me as Ethan's wife, as the perfect little homemaker, as the woman who had no idea her husband was a murderer. What would they think of me now? Would they pity me, judge me, whisper behind my back? I got in the car anyway. The grocery store was crowded, full of families and retirees and teenagers with their hands full of snacks. I pushed my cart through the aisles, trying to remember what I needed, trying to ignore the way my heart pounded every time someone looked in my direction. And then I saw her, a woman with blonde hair, pushing a cart with a toddler in the seat. She was wearing a red sweater, and for a split second I saw Melanie. I froze, my hands gripping the cart so hard my knuckles went white. But it wasn't Melanie. It was just a stranger.
A mom.
Someone who had no idea who I was or what I'd been through. I took a deep breath and kept walking. I made it through the checkout, through the parking lot, through the drive home. I didn't break down. I didn't scream. I just kept putting one foot in front of the other, because that's what you do when the world falls apart. You keep moving. That night, after Liam was asleep, I sat on Claire's porch with a glass of wine and watched the stars come out. The garden looked better now. The roses tamed, the weeds pulled. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Claire came out and sat beside me. "How are you feeling?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "Some days I feel like I'm drowning. Other days I feel like I'm finally learning how to swim." She nodded. "That's normal. It's going to take time." "I know." I took a sip of wine. "I just wish I knew what comes next. I can't stay here forever. I need to find a job.
A place of my own.
Something that's mine." "You will," Claire said. "You have time. You don't have to figure everything out tonight." She was right.
She was always right.
But patience had never been my strong suit. The next day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Jenna, the voice on the other end, was hesitant, familiar. "It's Sarah. From the PDA." I blinked. Sarah had been one of the few moms at Liam's school who hadn't looked at me like I was a pariah when the news broke. She'd sent a few texts, offered support, but we'd never been close.
"Hey, Sarah," I said.
"What's up? I know this is weird, but I heard you were looking for work. And I know a place. It's not glamorous. It's a little bookstore downtown, but the owner is a friend of mine, and she's hiring. I thought you might be interested." A bookstore. It wasn't what I'd pictured for my future, but it was something. It was a start. "I'll take it," I said. "When can I start?" Sarah laughed. "That eager? I'll text you the address. Just tell them I sent you." I hung up and stared at my phone.
A job.
A real job. Something that was mine, that had nothing to do with Ethan or Melanie or the ghosts of the past. It wasn't much, but it was everything. I started at the bookstore the following Monday. It was a tiny place, crammed with shelves and stacks, and the smell of old paper. The owner, a woman named Margaret, had silver hair and kind eyes and a way of making you feel like you'd known her your whole life. "You're Sarah's friend?" she asked. "Something like that," I said. "Good enough for me." She handed me an apron and pointed to a stack of boxes. "Those need sorting. Alphabetical by author. Think you can handle that?" I could. I absolutely could. The work was simple, repetitive, almost meditative. I lost myself in the rhythm of it, the feel of books in my hands, the quiet hum of the shop around me. It was peaceful in a way I hadn't expected, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't think about Ethan. I didn't think about the way his face had crumpled when I'd walked out. I didn't think about Melanie's confession or Rebecca's ghost or the key that had changed everything. I just sorted books. And it was enough. That evening, I went home to Claire's house and told her about the job. She was thrilled, practically bouncing with excitement. "This is huge, Jenna. This is the first step. You're doing it. You're actually doing it." "I know," I said, and I couldn't stop smiling. "I know." But that night, as I lay in bed, the smile faded. Because I knew the calm wouldn't last. It never did. There was still so much left to figure out. The custody battle, the divorce, the long, slow process of untangling my life from Ethan's. It was going to be hard. It was going to be messy. And part of me was terrified, but another part of me, the part that had planted a garden and sorted books and held my son while he cried, That part was ready. Because I'd faced ghosts and killers and the collapse of everything I'd believed in, Dad, and I was still standing. The next morning, I got a text from an unknown number. I thought it was Ethan again, and I almost deleted it without reading, but I didn't. The text was from a blocked number, no name attached. Just a single line, asterisk, he's not going to stop. Neither am I. Asterisk, I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. It wasn't Ethan's voice. It wasn't Melanie's, it was someone else. Someone I didn't know. Someone who had just promised me that this wasn't over. I stared at the text for so long my vision blurred. Asterisk, he's not going to stop. Neither am I. Asterisk, I read it 6 times. 7. Each time, the words seemed to rearrange themselves, like they were trying to form a different meaning. But they never did. They stayed the same. A threat. A promise. A door opening onto something I wasn't ready to face. Claire found me in the kitchen, still clutching my phone, my breakfast untouched. She took one look at my face and snatched the phone out of my hand. Who sent this? I don't know. It's a block number. She scrolled through the message, her jaw tightening. This is harassment. You need to report it. To who? The police? They're already dealing with Ethan and Melanie. They don't have time for anonymous texts. They'll make time. This is serious, Jenna. Someone is threatening you. I shook my head. It's probably just a prank. Someone who heard about the case and wants to stir up trouble. Claire wasn't convinced. I could see it in the way she held my phone, her fingers white-knuckled around the case. I'm calling my contact at the precinct. We're not taking any chances. She left the room before I could argue. I sat there, staring at the cold eggs on my plate, trying to convince myself that it was nothing. Just noise. Just the universe testing me one more time. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was something more. The next few days passed in a blur of work and worry. I went to the bookstore, sorted books, smiled at customers, and came home to Liam. I kept my phone on me at all times, waiting for another text that never came. The silence was almost worse than the threat. At least when I knew what I was dealing with, I could prepare. Margaret noticed I was distracted. She was a sharp woman, the kind who missed nothing, and she pulled me aside during my lunch break. Something's on your mind, she said. And don't tell me it's nothing. I've been running the shop for 30 years. I know when someone's carrying a weight. I hesitated, but there was something about Margaret's steady gaze that made me want to tell her everything.
So I did. The key.
The ghost. The confession. The text. All of it. She listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she let out a long, slow breath. That's quite a story, she said. I know it sounds crazy. It sounds like you've been through hell. She reached across the table and took my hand. But you're still here. That means something. What does it mean? It means you're stronger than you think. It means you've survived things that would have broken most people. And it means you're not going to let some anonymous coward scare you into hiding. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the fear was still there, coiled in my chest like a snake waiting to strike. That night, I got another text, asterisk, you think you're safe because you're working. You're not. Asterisk, I showed it to Claire. She called the police immediately. They took a report, said they'd look into it, but I could tell they didn't take it seriously. It was just a text. No physical threat. No evidence, but I knew better. The person sending these messages knew where I worked, knew my schedule, knew things about me that a stranger should know. That I started looking over my shoulder. Every customer who walked into the bookstore got a second glance. Every car that slowed down on the street outside made my heart race. I was jumpy, irritable, snapping at Liam for no reason, and then apologizing with tears in my eyes. Claire noticed. She sat me down one evening and said, "You can't keep living like this. You're going to drive yourself crazy." What am I supposed to do? Just pretend it's not happening? No. But you can't let them win. Whoever they are, Ethan's friends, Melanie's accomplices, some random internet troll, they want you scared. They want you to fall apart. And you're not going to give them that satisfaction. She was right.
She was always right.
But knowing something and feeling it were two different things. I started carrying pepper spray. I changed my route to work. I stopped answering calls from unknown numbers. I did everything I could think of to make myself feel safe, but the texts kept coming to asterisk. He loved her, Rebecca. More than he ever loved you. You think you know the whole story. You don't know anything. She's not the only one who died in that house. Asterisk, that last one stopped me cold. I read it over and over, my heart pounding. She's not the only one who died in that house. What did that mean? Was there another victim, another secret Ethan had buried? I called Claire. We need to go back to the Victorian house. Why? What happened? I got another text. It says someone else died there. Someone besides Rebecca. Claire was silent for a long moment. That's a pretty big leap, Jenna. It could just be more scare tactics. Or it could be the truth. And I need to know. She sighed.
Fine.
But we're not going alone.
I'm bringing backup.
2 days later, we stood in front of the Victorian house again. It looked even more decrepit in the daylight, the paint peeling, the porch sagging, the windows dark and empty. Claire had brought a private investigator she knew, a wiry man named Don with sharp eyes and a voice like gravel. You sure about this? He asked me. I'm sure. We pushed open the front door. The house smelled the same, dust and decay, and something else, something that made my skin crawl. But the key was gone. I'd left it on the mantelpiece, and it was still there, cold and inert, like it had given up its secrets and gone to sleep. Don started searching the house, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. Claire and I stood in the foyer, waiting, listening to the creak of floorboards overhead. Anything? I called up. Lots of junk, Don's voice echoed back. Old furniture. Boxes. Looks like nobody's been here in years. I walked into the living room, my eyes scanning the walls, the floor, the mantelpiece. There were photos there, old ones faded in tarnished frames. I picked one up and looked at it. It was Rebecca. She was younger, maybe in her early 20s, her dark hair pulled back, her smile wide and genuine. She was standing next to a woman who looked like her, maybe her sister, maybe her mother. They were both laughing at something off camera. I turned the frame over. On the back, in faded handwriting, was a name, asterisk Marta. 2005. Asterisk Marta. Not Rebecca. A different woman. A woman who had been in this house, who had laughed in this room, who had died here. I felt the temperature drop. A cold draft swept through the room, raising goosebumps on my arms, and then I heard her, a whisper, soft and distant, like a voice carried on the wind. Asterisk, help me. Asterisk, I spun around. There was no one there. Just Claire, her face pale, her hands shaking. You heard that? I said. She nodded. I heard something.
I don't know what.
Asterisk, please.
Help me.
He's still here. Asterisk, the voice was coming from upstairs. I started toward the staircase, my heart in my throat, but Claire grabbed my arm. Jenna, no. You don't know what's up there. Someone needs help, I said. Someone who's been trapped here, even longer than Rebecca. I pulled away and climbed the stairs. Each step creaked beneath my weight, and the whisper grew louder, more urgent. Asterisk, he's still here. He never left. He's waiting. Asterisk. What's waiting? I asked aloud. Who's still here? The whisper didn't answer. But as I reached the top of the stairs, I saw something. A door. A door I hadn't noticed before, hidden behind a faded tapestry. It was small, almost child-sized, and it was locked. I didn't have the key anymore. But I didn't need it. I reached out and touched the door. And I felt it. A pulse. A heartbeat. The same pulse I'd felt from the key, that someone was behind that door, someone who had been waiting for a very, very long time. I pressed my palm flat against the door, and the wood vibrated beneath my touch, like a living thing. The heartbeat I felt wasn't mine. It was coming from the other side, slow and steady, like someone had been waiting in that darkness for years, measuring time in the rhythm of their own pulse. Jenna, step back. Don's voice came from behind me, sharp and commanding. I don't know what you're feeling, but that door's been sealed for a reason. Someone's in there, I said. Someone alive. That's impossible. The house has been empty for years. The property records show no one's lived here since Rebecca died. Records are wrong. I turned to look at him, and I must have had something wild in my eyes because he took a step back. I can feel it. There's a person in there. A woman. She's been waiting for someone to find her. Claire came up the stairs behind Dawn, her face pale. Jenna, this is insane. Even if someone was in there, how would they have survived? There's no food, no water, no. She didn't survive, I said. She's been waiting. Just like Rebecca. But she's not a ghost. She's something else. I didn't know how I knew that. I just did. The same way I'd known Rebecca was behind me in my living room. The same way I'd known the key would show me the truth. The house was speaking to me, and I was finally listening. Don tried to push past me, but I blocked him. You can't open it, I said. You're not the one she's been waiting for. Then who is? I didn't answer. I just turned back to the door and pressed my forehead against its cool surface. The heartbeat was stronger now, faster, like it was responding to my presence. Who are you? I whispered, and then I heard her voice. Not the whisper from before. This was clearer, closer, like she was standing right on the other side of the wood. Oh, asterisk. I'm the one who was left behind. I'm the one who saw everything. I'm the one they buried in the walls. Asterisk. Bile rose in my throat. Buried? Who buried you? Asterisk. The same man who married you. The same man who pushed Rebecca down the stairs. He was just a boy when he did it to me. But he never forgot how. Asterisk. I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. Ethan. It was always Ethan. The first wife. The mistress. The woman in the walls. How many had there been? How many secrets had he buried in this house? Marta? I said. Your name is Marta. The door rattled in its frame. Asterisk. You know my name. How do you know my name? Asterisk. I found your photo. Downstairs. You were standing with Rebecca. There was a long silence. Then, so soft I almost didn't hear it. Asterisk. She was my sister. My little sister. I came to visit her that summer, and I never left. He put me in here because I saw what he did. I saw him push her. I saw him stand there while she bled. And when I tried to call for help, he locked me in and sealed the door. He said no one would ever find me. He said I'd be forgotten. Asterisk. I felt tears prick at my eyes. I found you. I'm here. Asterisk. He came back, you know. After Rebecca died. He came back to make sure I was still trapped. He brought the key with him. He kept it close, always close, because he knew that if anyone ever found it, they'd find me. And then he gave it to you. Asterisk. No, I said. He didn't give it to me. He hid it. I found it by accident. Asterisk. There are no accidents. You were meant to find it. You were meant to find me. And now you have to decide what to do with what you know. Asterisk. I looked at the door. It was old, rotting, held together by rusted nails and decades of neglect. I could have broken it down with my bare hands if I'd wanted to do it, but I didn't. I turned to Dawn. I need you to call the police. And I need you to tell them to bring a search team. There's a body in this house. Behind this door. Dawn's face went gray. A body, a skeleton. Been here for years. Ethan put her there when he was a teenager. Before he married Rebecca. He's been burying women in this house his whole life. Claire stepped forward, her hand on my arm. Jenna, how do you know this? How can you be sure? I looked at the door. At the wood that had held Marta's secret for so long. At the pulse that was fading now, like she'd said everything she needed to say, because she told me. I said. And she's been waiting a very long time to be heard. The police arrived within the hour. I stood on the front lawn, Liam in my arms. Claire had called a babysitter to bring him, and I couldn't let him go, couldn't stop holding him tight against my chest. Mommy, what's happening? He asked, his voice muffled against my shoulder. Something good, baby. Something that was supposed to happen a long time ago. They found Marta behind the door, just like I'd said. A skeleton, dressed in clothes that had been fashionable in the early 2000s, with a locket around her neck that held a picture of her and Rebecca. The police asked me a lot of questions. I answered them as honestly as I could. I told them about the key, about the visions, about the whispers. I told them everything. They didn't believe me. Not really. But they didn't have to believe me to know the truth. The evidence was there, in that room, in the bones of a woman who had been forgotten for almost 2 decades. Ethan's lawyer called the next day. They were withdrawing the plea deal. They were preparing for a trial that would expose everything, not just Rebecca's death, but Marta's. And who knew how many more? The news hit the papers, the local stations, the national networks. The story was everywhere. The architect who had been hiding bodies in his childhood home. The wife who had uncovered the truth with a key and a ghost. That I didn't watch the coverage. I couldn't. It was too much, too big, too overwhelming. Instead, I sat in Claire's garden with Liam, surrounded by the roses I'd pruned, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace, real, genuine, unshakable peace. "Mommy," Liam said, tugging on my sleeve. "Is Daddy going to jail forever?" "Yes, baby. He is." "Is that bad?" I thought about it. Thought about Ethan, the man I'd loved, the man I'd trusted, the monster who had been hiding in plain sight. Thought about Rebecca and Marta and all the women who had been silenced. "No," I said. "It's not bad. It's justice." Liam nodded, like he understood, even though I knew he didn't. He was 5. He shouldn't have to understand things like this, but he would. Someday. And I'd be there to help him make sense of it. That night, after Liam was asleep, I walked out to the garden and sat under the stars. The roses were blooming, their petals soft and fragrant in the cool night air. I reached out and touched one, feeling its velvet surface against my fingers. And then I felt it, a warmth, a presence, not threatening, not demanding. Just there I looked up to Rebecca was standing at the edge of the garden, her form faint and translucent, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She was smiling. "Asterisk, you did it." "Asterisk," she said. "Asterisk, you found her. You freed her." "Where is she now?" I asked. "Somewhere warm. Somewhere safe. Just like me." Asterisk, I nodded.
I'm glad.
Asterisk, are you? Asterisk, she tilted her head. Asterisk, you've been through so much, Jenna. More than anyone should have to endure. And you're still standing. That's not luck. That's strength. Asterisk. I don't feel strong, I said. I feel tired. Asterisk, that's what strength feels like when you're using it. She started to fade, her form growing dimmer, but her voice lingered in the air. You're going to be okay, Jenna. You're going to build a beautiful life. Not because it's easy, but because you're brave enough to try. Asterisk, and then she was gone. I sat in the garden for a long time after that, just breathing, just existing. The stars were bright above me, the roses fragrant around me, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could see the future. It wasn't a clear picture. There were still so many unknowns. The trial, the custody battle, the long, slow process of rebuilding, but I wasn't afraid anymore, because I had something I hadn't had before. I had the truth. And the truth, no matter how painful, was the only thing that could ever set me free. I stood up, brushed the dirt off my jeans, and walked back into the house. Liam was still asleep, his small body curled up in the middle of the bed, his stuffed dinosaur clutched to his chest. I lay down beside him and wrapped my arms around him. Everything's going to be okay, I whispered. I promise. He stirred, mumbled something in his sleep, and settled back against me, and I closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I slept without dreaming, and when I woke up, the sun was shining, the birds were singing, and my son was smiling at me. I'm hungry, Mommy, he said. I laughed. It was a real laugh, from somewhere deep in my chest. Me too, baby. Let's go make pancakes. And we did. We made pancakes with chocolate chips and whipped cream, and we ate them on the porch, watching the roses sway in the breeze. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't tidy, but it was ours. And that was more than enough. Because I was free. Finally, completely, absolutely free.